You know, this may surprise some of you, but I don't always like to crap on bad anime because you know what? I have to watch it too. At any rate, sometimes I think anime gets made by pulling words out of a hat and praying. This one in particular kind of flies sideways over the heads of Western audiences, which is understandable because not even hardened mafiosos would want to set foot in a public school these days. Thanks, Betsy DeVos. The Gokusen, which is a contraction of Gokudo, meaning gangster, and sensei, meaning teacher, started life as a manga, got itself adapted into a number of TV series and movies, and hit the animated airwaves in 2004. Honestly, I think it might sell better nowadays if they rebranded it like it was a light novel adaptation. I'm a delinquent, but now my homeroom teacher is a Yakuza? Speaking of which, I don't know if anyone has picked up on this yet, but when Yakuza show up in anime or video games, they're kinda weird. The characters are functionally from a whole other universe, with various strange platitudes, slang, and sayings. I don't think it's odd to say that the Yakuza portrayed in a lot of animation are basically like fey creatures. Look at it this way. They come to dispense help and advice for people in crisis, their involvement makes things go very odd, and when they're finished they go back to their compounds until they're next needed. These representations also have very recognizable traits, like being supernally good fighters, and being able to perform astonishing feats with unlikely weapons, or draw daggers from nowhere. They also react like a vampire to garlic at the sight of cops, and the ones that walk in normal society hold ludicrous amounts of power. Their hierarchies are almost feudal and can be broken into the goon, capital T, capital G, and the boss, capital T, capital B, for most of their interactions, which are almost able to be lifted from one show to another completely different show. They are more like fey creatures that show up to shake things up than what the Western depiction of organized crime is, which is conversely a lot more violent, befitting the subject matter. Calling it romanticized is kind of doing a disservice to romanticism. This is full-on Feywild. So, with this in mind, let us turn back to the series at hand, Gokusen, which has fully embraced the Yakuza as elves narrative. Kumiko Yamaguchi, Yankumi to her dirtbag students, is the kind of character who is basically a daywalker in this sense. She has to keep her true Yakuza nature under wraps as she tackles the problem of an all-boys school, and yeesh, this joint looks like the only viable argument for arming teachers. She and another lady teacher, brought in by the comically perverted principal, everybody laugh, start their first days at Shirokin High School, which I would call a Gokudo recruiting grounds, but even the Yakuza have standards. Immediately, they're dumped into tracksuits because these little cretins will try to shoot upskirt shots of them if they don't. The other teachers wear similar war gear because apparently love isn't the battlefield, compulsory education is. Despite this hostile environment, we're introduced to our primary students, Shin, Kuma, Slickback, Hatboy, and Mineta. Shin is the ringleader, which makes him memorable, and Kuma is the fat kid, so he sticks out. The rest of them, I just gotta take an aside and say, God damn, these fucks are hideous. Not that every anime character has to be some brilliant star of attractiveness, and God knows everything looks the same nowadays, but holy crap, these guys fell out of the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. But on the converse side, they also kind of remind me of ukiyo-e woodblock art, which are intense and expressive, but beauty is kind of a secondary concern. This is also referenced in the ending, which has a combination of ukiyo-e and Taisho-era outfits. Or, I don't know, maybe the character designs are just fucking ugly, I don't know. So front and center of my problem with this story is that I don't really care what happens to these characters. Cue the line, I don't care what happens to these people. Or alternatively, I don't care what happens to these people. Yankumi, which is what the students call Kumiko, is a rich heiress to a crime family and probably has a body count on her. I'd rather see her in court for racketeering, that sounds more engaging to me. The delinquents are even worse. There's an early episode where everyone expects that the purse snatcher prowling around is one of the kids from the delinquent school because it happened near the delinquent school. Now, while there may be socioeconomic implications of this particular school that I'm not aware of, because it's all in the visual shorthand, their anger of being thought of as punks who snatch purses is hollow and stupid. You cannot look like a punk. You can wash the dye out of your hair and at least look like somebody who belongs in normal society. If you're gonna rebel, make your teenage rebellion mean something. And especially knowing that this is a society that values looking like everybody else as much as it does, wouldn't it be better to be a delinquent and still look like a straight up and fly right kid? I mean, you'd get away with more crap. These kids are just bad because, quote unquote, they're bad, and they have to be shamed or otherwise cajoled into acting like human beings. If everyone thinks you're a shitlord because of the way you dress, speak, and act, then, you can, in fact, change the way that you dress, speak, and act. That would solve the problem. Obviously, this is a statement that only works for the situation as presented, where there are no overt gangs, the Yakuza don't want them, and they're part of a monolithic, homogenous culture. My advice on how to fix this situation would not fly in the US of A, but the factors going into this Japanese production fairly well scream the obvious solution. If your plot only works because your characters are idiots, then don't write that plot. Also, the quote-unquote sexy teacher is perfectly okay with sleeping with her students, which is super mega fucking gross. So, no, I don't particularly have any affection for this series. The show isn't funny or interesting. Its humor and maturity are all over the place. Fucking everyone has fish lips and it's weirding me out. The colors are washed out, and there's nothing remarkable about the animation since everything looks off-model and wrong anyway. And I'll be honest, I get tired of watching shows where I'm supposed to identify or feel sympathy for complete dipshits. My interest in a show that is ostensibly supposed to be serious fades like a leaf on the wind in the face of doofy characters who barely straddle the line of being sensible human beings. Yakuza problems aren't problems that I care to watch. So here's the thing about Yakuza shows in general. They're antiquated. They are so antiquated that when you try to make Yakuza media with the beats that normally appear in them, they actually make the show weird. If you take the Yakuza template and drop it into slice of life like this show does, then it comes with all these weird caveats to make the series even work in a way that approaches being meaningful. Having this pack of mutants be her class is in service to a story that doesn't have much to say except weird Yakuza platitudes that are probably very meaningful to somebody who cares about this shit. But contrast this with the Yakuza game series. The game series understands its antiquated notions require the sacrifice of certain elements of reality. Those games end up being really peculiar in certain ways, but it's more acceptable because they have a veneer of surreality to it from the start. That veneer adjusts expectations of the series out the gate and makes it a better series altogether because they can go buck wild when they need to. Gokusen does not have this particular veneer, and it really makes it feel like the Yakuza stuff is just rudely intruding into reality. Obviously, it is intruding on reality, but the way that they do it makes it feel less like the criminal underworld is crisscrossing with school drama, and more like there are magical creatures here from another world to try and fix these delinquents. I'm already sour on school stuff. I'm not big on shows that paint organized crime in a good light. Fuck a teenager. Don't fuck a teenager, but fuck teenagers. The writing and animation are all eh. There was no way that this was getting out of this episode with a positive recommendation. So I guess the real question is, does this show suck? Well, I think it's ugly as shit, but is it bad? Nah. This is kind of eh. It's very stock standard for Yakuza stories, and you can set your watch by the story beats. But apparently it's appealing to someone. I feel like there's an audience out there that only really watches shows like this, and I'm sure they're quite pleased with it. But for a general anime-watching audience, I don't think it's going to do too much that they couldn't get from, say, My Bride is a Mermaid. This is a show that exists. The English dub isn't awful, but it's workmanlike. It functions only as far as it needs to. And it's also worth noting that this probably wasn't meant to be marathoned like I did. But in this age of streaming, shows exist in more than just a weekly airing space. Even back in 2004 when this show first came out, DVD sets were a thing. I just wonder if they ever expected anyone to go back and watch it again. Funny to think of, isn't it? Anyway, all you have to lose is time if you watch this, but I have my doubts if you would actually enjoy it. But far be it from me to tell you up or down. I'm sure this show has its fans. I just don't happen to be one of them. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.